Welcome to the Great Witness, Kevin the Great Witness show. The new venture series is with Kevin Smith from the UK reporting on his real side experiences, and we will comment and ask questions and see if we can become more aware here. Welcome, Kevin.
In this real side experience, I would have what I construed as another future view regarding situations on Earth. Again, we must be aware of how every decision, every agreement is instantly so in reality, as everything is, and that it is only the process of conversion of these agreement ideas, these causes to effects, the experiences that stem from the agreement ideas, that takes the time that it does on the simulated one-dimensional physical arena. Everything equals itself. Intent, ideas formulated, and instantly so. But we are trying to recognize this isness, and the best position this can be achieved is from a simulation that represents that which the is isn't. As the simulations process what would be instant reflected realities from the ideas we agree to into drawn-out sequences of events and situations, and so we can begin to recognize how, absent of the simulated creations, we would be that which we decide in every new moment. But of course, the isness is a complete, absolute reality, where everything is available, and we are this everything that it is, once we recognize that we are. So this would make free will decision making unnecessary. For how can you sit in the everything that you are and that everything is, and want to experience something specific, some isolated event or experience, even though you already are standing in now the everything that life is, that by its isness definition must be everything you could imagine. But should you want to create something, as you stand in the everything that is, you would have to do that in a position that is aside from the everything that is, which would be creation, and you would be at liberty to do so, once you had recognized and were standing in the true reality of your real awareness in recognition of the is. But until you have completed your awareness and have recognized the is, far more sense would it make to keep creating to only what is necessary as regards to sharing the is minimum. For the process of getting through creation is arduous as it is. But then, as you become more aware, you become conscious of your creations and the effects they generate, and then it rather becomes an individual choice as to the extent of how you will utilize creation, and in what way as you go about your process. The overall key important aspect is always the real intent and the focus on that, assuming you want to be in a position where you are not bound to creation in any way. But anyway, so yes, the real side, life is aside from the simulated cause to effect processing of the physical level, although a part of the simulation as the life levels that express from the other four vehicles that which we decide through our 5 bodies is reflected on the real side of the personal self, and the life levels that are effected from them, but all the ideas are rather fed into the physical body like a data stream that then converts them into experience that we perceive through the physical body senses, like wearing a virtual reality headset. When we take off the headset, move our awareness from the physical body. When we move from the consciousness and onto the real side, we are the awareness that animates the body forms and consciousness. Though if we remain attached to the personal self, we just experience what of the real side and the multi-dimensional nature of the personal self, that which the personal self wants to see, usually an extension of that which it holds dear, its tap lines, its specific decided thrills, and rather is enclosed in its own bubble on the real side, that negates any inclusion from the guides and life due to the disconnect from the real awareness that we in fact are. So as we step into the real awareness, however, a real awareness that is everything and is through all the consciousness and the created simulation the consciousness effects, so can it see everything that the consciousness currently comprises of, the ideas, agreements, the intents. And even though the simulated physical level rollout of idea agreements to experience takes the time that it does, it is instantly so in reality and on the real side. So then, as we stand in the real awareness that has the overview of the entire creation, can we see the culmination of the overall consciousness as it stands now, or specific effects that will be so from specific agreements that are available for perusal on the real side? But of course, as agreements fluctuate, so must the effects, and that which is in instant reflection of that which is agreed to on the real side will change accordingly, and only if an agreement is maintained long enough will it reach physical level simulated cause to effect actuality. So these future views will fluctuate, and it's important to pay attention to how they do, for what is being agreed to in one moment may change the next, and we ought not cling on to one future view and assume then it is a done deal. This future view in this real side experience would be regarding the possibility of aliens and their mass and very apparent for all the world to see arrival on Earth. Interestingly, I would be in the form of Lance Henriksen, an actor, and specifically playing the role that he had as he featured in a series called Millennium, and in my company would be Terry O'Quinn, another actor who starred in the same series. This, I had the impression, was to represent the overall theme of the future view, for as the Millennium series dealt with cataclysms, upheavals, doomsday prophecies and such, it would indicate how indeed great changes lay ahead for humanity, especially where the alien factor is involved, and as this experience would reveal, the situation, that of alien arrival en masse, has taken a rather unbeneficial turn. I'm uncertain who the individual was that had the form of Terry O'Quinn, though I suspect he was a real guide, and maybe Paul, as Paul has a tendency to assume movie actor forms. And indeed, on a real side experience I shared a year ago or so, I would be with a group in an open field, and a large flying saucer had landed. It contained occupants that never would be revealed to my personal self in that experience, but I was with a team that had surrounded the craft and were taking readings and measurements with an array of technology, as though we were determining all we could as to the aliens' intentions based on readings we were gathering via technology. The technology, more just for a representation of intent reading through the real awareness perhaps, but maybe we were actually assessing the threat level through what tech the ship carried, as though the aliens always were of a particular personal self-attitude driven, that to be not entirely trustworthy, and the leader of our group had been again an individual in the form of Terry O'Quinn. So even back then I had a hint as to the potential arrival of the aliens and their intervention into human affairs, but from a beneficial, making sense with life standpoint, and backed by the real guides. As a leader of our awareness-orientated group would suggest a guide or Dwayne, and so it was safe to surmise, as this individual featured again in this recent real side experience, it was the same guide, and based on the form he assumed, what had been occurring in that brief experience from a year ago was connected with this current one. We were stationed in a kind of a military base. It seemed to be constructed almost as though in preparation for the aliens' arrival, a centre for operations. And during the uneventful first few moments of the experience, I would be constantly being trained by Terry, more a physical training, but suggesting a preparedness for what was to come, for we always are making refinements, adjustments, aligning the personal self with the real intent for that which we will be facing and involved with, for as the process of awareness continues, so will it become ever more real, as we face the whole of life, and through all the confrontation we will receive, and the personal self needs to be more so aligned with the real intent and more under control, that we are better able to stand indifferent to all that we must go through, and not be pulled into the personal self through the emotional reactions and considerations we activate in response to escalating awareness bolstering situations that the personal self doesn't present as an obstacle or resistance. And on the real side, this preparation, this constant refinement of the personal self through all aspects of it, can be expressed in various ways, but often it's as though we are going through boot camp like military physical training or exercise, building our strength for what is to come. For now, in this real side experience, the aliens had arrived, and we would receive this information in our base of operations here. Agreement has been maintained for the longest time for the arrival of beneficial, guide-backed aliens, for as I have recounted, this future view of mass alien arrival I have had consistently since childhood and to this current moment. So this is an event that was always to be so, as agreement for it is retained, and despite the controlling dark forces not wishing this to be, as it will rather interfere with their agendas of continued human consciousness constriction and control, they can do nothing against something that is agreed to. They can only manipulate agreement and consciousness. They can't directly control free will, even though through their technology they seek to do so. As such, the controllers have options. They can go with it, turn themselves around, and become more aware also, and be a part of the creational wake-up and not oppose it, or they can tuck tail, literally, and flee the planet, retreat, and withdraw their control from Earth, or as is more likely, due to their attitudes of if I can't have it, no one can, they will try to stage a disruptive event of their own, interfere in some way, or maybe try and destroy the entire planet if they can't have their way. I have seen variations of all these potentialities in my real side experiences also, and all again subject to agreement through the masses that such can feature in their experience. The trouble is, the controllers already have agreement from the unconscious masses, as their consciousness has been moulded to agreement with the controllers over eons of lifetimes, that the controllers can then continuously feature in humanity's simulation and indeed mould the consciousness according to agreements to control that allow them to do so. So we can see that as more people become more aware, they move more into a decision of indifference to the consciousness and retract constant agreement to its controlled construction, agreement to the consciousness that would be so if they retained awareness with the personal self only. Aware individuals have then a more conscious handle on what agreements they are making, and that by stepping out of the consciousness of dark force design, so less agreement facilitates the controller's ability to manage the simulation in the restricting way that they do. But with the unconsciousness as it generally still stands, the agreements with the controllers maintained, the dark forces can then at any time launch these events and destructive creations of their own, just as one of the new friends had a real side experience future view of a comet being steered into the earth, as this was always one of the controller's options. For in this future view, a single craft had landed, just like it had in the experience a year or so back, where we all stood around it taking readings, so very much a part of the same experience, just separated by months, as it was shown in parts to the personal self, as we had waited patiently for the emerging alien crew, as though it were a scout ship, the first of many, I surmise, as though the aliens were testing the water, gauging how they were to be received. Up until now, in all these future views of impending alien arrivals, I'd never seen the actual aliens, and were uncertain as to what form they may take. But in a recent real side experience I shared, it was revealed that yes, the alien arrival was to be so. Yes, the dark forces would interfere, and also the reptilians would reveal themselves. But the reptilians were received very badly. I suggested it was due to the consciousness of humanity, and how they have taken on the consideration that the reptilians are the bad guys, despite how many of them are actually stepping up with the guides and Dwayne. I would say, based on what I've seen, there are more reptilians stepping up than not, and really it's just their ruling elites that want to cling onto a control, their version of the 1%, that dictates to the many, and I considered that how the reptilians were received was due to how the consciousness has been subliminally programmed into a mistrust for the reptilian body form. But in fact, why there was this poor reception and hostility to the revealing of the reptilians would now be made apparent. And it wasn't that the reptilians revealing themselves was a separate event in conjunction with the arrival of the aliens and their craft, but it was the same event, for the arriving aliens were actually the reptilians, and so finally the type of alien that would be manning the craft and making their arrival known on a global scale would also be made apparent, and these were again the stepping up reptilians, and this singular scout craft contained 3 individuals looking as reptilian as you can imagine, with their green scaled skin, tails, etc. But then, as I said, although the controllers couldn't prevent something that based on agreement must be so, they would attempt disruption, also based on agreement. That is like an open door that always allows them to do so, through the agreements of control in the human consciousness. They rather invaded our center of operations, and their dark force military took control of it, shutting us down effectively. For through this base we were in communication with the reptilians, the 3 that had landed, and vast multitudes off a planet that were waiting to see how their scout group were received. At the same time, I had the impression that the 3 reptilians and their ship had been contained, as though locked in a kind of quarantine field of energy, which encapsulated a large area also, a town or city, where their craft had landed. With communication broken, I decided to go and engage with the reptilians directly, and would prepare to disembark on the journey, for it seemed our base of operations was close to the city where the reptilian craft had landed. At this moment I had taken on the form of Doctor Who, the Peter Capaldi version, as though a representation that, as much as my Lance Henriksen form suggested upheavals and tumultuous possibilities, with the Millennium series he and Terry were associated with, so we can say that a doctor's capacity is to fix and mend things, and as a Doctor Who is rather galactic, this was suggesting the resolving, fixing, mending, or the attempting to, of a galactic alien involved situation that was looking precarious. For my impressions were that the reptilians, waiting in their billions, watching what was taking place, were somewhat dismayed and angry at what was transpiring, and I would remark to Terry, who I impressioned was a guide as I said, how these reptilians stepping up as they are still generally very unaware and personal self-orientated, and their personal self-consciousness and favoured attitudes are rather warlike and aggressive, so always tentative must a dealing with them be, softly, step by gentle step approach. For the reptilians have technology that can blast the earth to atoms if they so chose, and although for those stepping up that wasn't their intention, they would very likely react in volatile, destructive ways if they were attacked, or as in this case, their scout party compromised. Seems I then was rather in an ambassador of Earth capacity, and the scene would switch, that I now was on location within the enclosed energy quarantined town where the ship was contained. What I found was that the three reptilians were in a kind of dazed stupor, as though possessed, and would attack and lunge at me, though clumsily. My impression was that this energy field had some Wi-Fi 5G component to it, and these reptilians were infused with a similar nanotech as all the human body forms are. Perhaps a means of control of the reptilians from the elite and royal reptilians, maybe a standard for the species, as their nanotech may serve them beneficially in regards to technology interfacing. But basically, the nano had been activated in this 5G Wi-Fi field, and it's as though the dark forces were controlling these three reptilians' body forms and causing them to be almost as though in a trance-like state. I did manage to communicate with them to an extent, but my impression was that due to what had transpired, the reptilian fleets of craft poised for entry withdrew, and that the dark force controllers then launched some event of their own, maybe a blue beam fake invasion, and through their control of these three captive reptilians, they used them for propaganda purposes. In other words, they marketed the masses of humanity into thinking that what was now a dark force orchestrated alien invasion or some destructive event or other was actually due to the reptilians, that they were responsible, when in reality they were not, and had elected not to execute their mass arrival for the world to see, and then to engage peacefully with the humans, given the circumstances. At least they hadn't decided to retaliate for what may seem to them to be a betrayal, although they may have realized it was the controlling dark forces that had instigated what had transpired. But even so, their mass arrival was momentarily postponed, and this would explain then where the hostility to the reptilians came from, as I previously recounted from the other real side experience where the reptilians were received poorly, as they were revealed at the same time as the alien ships were making their presence known. The humans had been marketed into the notion that they were at war with the reptilians. It did seem as though I was sent to engage with the entranced reptilians, as my impression was that I had been working with them and other StepUP reptilians on the real side, so I was rather trusted among them, and perhaps controlled as the three reptilians were. Perhaps they would still recognize me, and although they did seem to, as their initial attacks would cease, it seemed they were controlled now through their nanotech to an extent that effectively their body vehicles were like vessels for the dark forces and their propaganda ideas. And in fact, this real side experience ties in with another real side experience I shared a number of months ago, and that I had recounted on one of these shows several weeks ago, where there was the future view of alien invasion, but one designed to subjugate further the human race, and in fact mechanize it. The controlling elites had fled the planet, but those controllers that remained, realizing they were abandoned and hung out to dry, had 3 test subjects, that the study of which it was believed might somehow offset what was an invasion, that the controllers stuck on the planet with the masses would have to suffer also. I would suggest these 3 test subjects were these 3 scout reptilians, who had been used and controlled in conjunction with a faked invasion or global created disaster, all for the purposes of securing mistrust and fear toward the reptilians, and now, with some kind of invasion about to occur, the Dark Force scientists left on the planet were studying the 3 reptilians. Maybe the study of their specific reptilian nanotech that they had may somehow provide the scientists with the knowledge of how to offset what was going to take place through their analysis of the reptilian nanotech. For in that experience from months ago, the invasion took the form of a kind of nanotech mass conversion, and that which was required for it to be came down in spacecraft of a kind all over the world, as though the ships were dumping something technological that then swarmed over the Earth and converted all life to mechanical. I'm uncertain as to the source of this invasion and subsequent effects of mass mechanical conversion of all life, but the elite controllers either knew of it and had departed to safe haven, or had created or arranged it, perhaps deciding that as agreements stand, the beneficial reptilians can execute their Earth arrival at any moment, but through what had transpired, and with the reptilian ships withdrawing, but perhaps only temporarily. There was only a window before the reptilians or other aliens perhaps decided to execute their mass arrival, and so the controllers allowed, decided, or created this mass mechanical conversion event, leaving the lower tiers of their controlling earth-bound systems of individuals in the lurch. The abandoned Dark Force controllers, studying the nanotech-infused, zombified 3 reptilian scouts, that they may find a cure or some way to mitigate the effects of what was perhaps then reptilian or alien nanotech due to be dumped on the planet Earth. And so, as I said, this is a more current future view. It is based on what is being decided and agreed to now, and if the agreements then are maintained, this will play out along these lines on the physical. But as we have learned, agreements change, and there are many elements and factors involved that are shifting agreement back and forth. The human masses, the reptilians and aliens that intend their mass arrival, and the controllers who wish it not to be so, and intend to disrupt, derail, or even destroy the planet if they feel they have no other option. And with agreements through the consciousness, the dark forces always can feature in human experience, and in whatever way that the parameters of the agreements allow. So it has rather swung back to being a somewhat bleak situation. But then the guides, Dwayne, and the aware individuals in support of them are constant in their efforts for a beneficial outcome for all, and as it does take time for the effects to show up on the physical from whatever the agreements are, a lot can happen in the window between cause to effect, as in reality, what with everything being in every isness now a moment, with agreement you could rearrange the entire simulation in a single breath of so-called time. Dwayne, the great writer, responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "It is a moment-by-moment situation, and it's touchy, because aliens and people are very attached to their attitudes. Everything is about awareness. As each individual learns about their real awareness, to focus on that instead of attitudes with the personal self, which usually equal nothing but problems, situations, drama, and more chaos. Those listening, and that have the awareness with this, take heed, because your help is needed to be open to understand what's going on, and to help negotiate and help these individuals. Help yourself become more aware and understand what's taking place, more so than any spiritual program that you've been through. Because none of these silly things work. None of them. no matter what. It's not about love the earth, love this, or whatever. These are real situations that are taking place, just like the COVID virus, etc. And it's going to get worse, because there are a lot of knuckleheads on this planet who do not care about any of this or other places. All they want to do is conquer and destroy. Each person shouldn't wait for the real guides to do it. Step up with your intent. Get real. Do something. Get involved. This is part of your wake up too. If you don't, you're going to be left behind. You would have left yourself behind. It's very, very real.
Thank you again. It's a lot of stuff. I see a lot of intense preparation going on here by lots of the groups involved here, the aliens, the real guides. Everybody's like preparing for different outcomes. Again, let me refer you to Money Heist from the Netflix series. Very, very good example of how they prepared for years these heists to get the gold out of the Spanish mint. Takes a lot of preparation. What is the other side going to do? How are you going to respond? When you respond, how are they going to respond? And just down the line, what are they going to respond? You know, there are 3, 4, 5 steps along the line where how they're going to respond and what you're going to do. I mean, that's a literal kind of side of preparation, but I just see it as a lot of behind the scenes, what's going on. We just see maybe, I don't know, 10%, whatever, on the surface world, what's going on, but behind the scenes, there's so much going on. And that's why you're valuable, Kevin, Jeremy, to see, to show us what is going on. It's interesting that the reptilians, the 1%, the controller part of them are, doing this, and a lot of them, as you see it, a lot of them are returning to do something better. Yeah, and the agreements that people have made, I mean, these have been going on for so long, for lifetimes. It's not just this lifetime, but lifetimes of agreement into the subconscious level, where people are agreeing to the systems, the religions, the spiritual paths, and all this collected baggage that we have to get rid of. It could be like miles high, stuff we have with us, that we're carrying with us, that we don't even see. So we have to get through ourselves. We have to get through what we're being faced with here on the surface world. There's a lot going on right now. Jeremy, do you have anything to comment on it? On the alien invasion or other?
Yeah, I wanted to just to kind of chime in a little bit. I mean, it's all there, like Kevin said. The 5G and the nano, that's getting pretty real. You know, they're setting all of this up with, especially with the graphene building block of nanotechnology. You know, I won't get too much into that, but yeah. I just wanted to say on the real side, I've been seeing a lot of preparation, specifically in my individual journey, a lot of subconscious preparation. I mean, that's where a lot of this stuff lies in, this agreement. It's unconscious, you know, it's in us, like you were saying, for lifetimes, not just this lifetime, Val. So a lot of it is subconscious. So I've been going through a lot of subconscious things. I mean, something so intense that I get a view of my physical body just shaking in the bed, and I'll be, you know, on the real side, but I can see both views simultaneously. That's how real it gets.
Yeah. And you mentioned the graphite. I just saw something about that. What's that about again? The graphite?
Graphene oxide. It's a self-forming little structure. It's just like carbon and, you know, whatever, but they're putting it in the vaccines, and the vaccines have, I think they're 98% graphene. They go in clear, and then once they're exposed to electromagnetic frequencies, they self-formulate, and they actually can pass through the blood-brain barrier because they're so small. So they essentially, it's like wrapping your brain in a type of molecular chicken wire, you know, and then it's electrically conductive. So as soon as it gets hit with any kind of frequency, they can induce states of fear, apathy, or whatever they want to do. Essentially, it's like a kill switch. When it gets embedded, it intertwines with your muscles and everything, your whole structure. Cell phones set it off, any kind of EMF.
Thank you. Kevin, can you kind of, for the public, can you kind of just give us a general overview of reptilians, what they're about, how, their culture, just anything, kind of a general viewpoint? Because maybe some people haven't really, they hear about them and they're kind of scary and stuff, but can you kind of just give us a brief overview of what they're about and what happened to them? Were they humanoid and or some other kind of body form, and they turned into this physical form that's kind of gruesome?
I let them hear you calling them that.
Well,
I mean, the reptilians, as a species, as a consciousness, are as they are because of the decisions and choices that they've made. I mean, with an individual, as it is with a species. I mean, the experiences that they project for themselves, where they position themselves in life, the body forms they assume, is all based on what they decide and how they decide to model and mold and create their consciousness. And because everything is a reflection of itself, and as much as your positions in life will reflect your decisions, if your decisions are very poor in regards to well, decisions basically will form two broad categories. Are they supporting of life and awareness, or are they detrimental and restricting of life and awareness and more personal self-serving? And so the more the decisions and choices you make that benefit life and awareness and support it in all its forms, and supporting the all-natural environment through all the life levels, which is the is expressed in creation, which also represents a supporting of life and awareness, then so your experiences will reflect those type of choices and you'll be positioned accordingly. And for those who do the opposite, those that their decisions and choices are more along the destructive and awareness repressing lines, so will their positions reflect that, and they will find themselves in similar circumstances and harsh conditions according to what they have subjected others to. And the body forms reflect that as well.
yeah, and they're just basically like us. I mean, they have attitudes, right? They have like, their awareness is not necessarily, or even less maybe, than humans. How does that work? Where's their awareness from your experience?
I mean, as individuals go through their process of creation, if they go along the, I mean, the whole idea of creation is to become more aware, to get through creation and eventually recognize the is, and it's really is a natural process that every individual will have the inclination to pursue, because obviously there'll be a real awareness that does animate the personal self, regardless of the personal self being conscious of it or not. And obviously with the disconnect from the real awareness, it takes time for that to be re-established, and eventually it will, but there'll always be the real awareness sort of nudging and encouraging behind the scenes, and generally the individual will have the inclination to move through creation and progressively make better and better decisions, and recognize the decisions that are poor, that are not beneficial for the awareness that every individual actually is. And so, but with a lot of species, they can become rather stuck in sort of ruts and routines of attitude, which have them then sort of evolving on the spot. And the body forms, as we were saying, do reflect the awareness it does seem that the reptilian body form is generally the body form that is assumed by individuals that are rather base and aggressive and rather lacking awareness, because what we have in creation is individuals enter the simulator. They start off in animal forms which are directly connected to the real awareness, and so they automatically make sense with life because it's simply real awareness animating directly through a body vehicle, and there is no there's no sort of literal capacity. There's no literal facilities that have been those body forms have that then result in the individual being locked into their own little personal self illusions, which then disconnects them from the real awareness, which then results in a split between the two awarenesses. You have a personal awareness then and a real awareness, and then therefore you have the disconnect. But when individuals first then transition into the initial forms after the animal forms, their forms will be very rudimentary in their process because they've only just shifted into the very first forms that an individual will take straight after the body forms. So you would expect they would to be almost in a stage beyond a sort of an animal form, and so you do see that sort of form expressed as as the reptilian body form, almost like walking, talking dinosaurs, as it were. But
just general overview for those who might want to know more. But and then,
well, I mean, as I said, the reptilian body form basically expresses as an individual who is very unaware, who's deciding along the lines of abrasiveness and very attitude driven and inclined to control others. And of course, the reptilian body form is very prehistoric in its design. It sort of indicates a sort of an awareness that is very much stuck and with very old and restricting and limiting ideas. And the reptilian consciousness is very controlling and warlike because it's based on their consciousness. All consciousness is based on fear generally. And with them, in particular, their species, they have a fear of not having everything that they want, and this fear expresses then as they want to suppress everybody else to ensure that they have everything and everybody else has nothing. And their idea is along the lines of they recognise how creation works in regards to the cause and effect nature of it, and so they've realised that in order for them to feature in the experience of others, and also for them to be able to control others, and therefore through their agreements they can get a simulation according to their design, they've basically subjugated species throughout the universe, use their various marketing ploy and intimidation tactics to conquer and get all the species agreement and all the agreement through the subconscious lifetime after lifetime, which then results in their ability to continuously and consistently control species, subjugate them, manage the consciousness in such a way that then it affects a simulation according to their design, which incorporates them, allows them to feature in the experience of all the individuals who've agreed to them at any point that they so want, and also gives them almost like the agreement permission to be able to constantly manage the consciousness, mold it, readjust it, impose on everyone's simulation of experience, and continuously restrict and control people to a point.
yeah, but we're here for them too. We're here for everybody. So it doesn't matter the body type. And like Dwayne says, it's very fragile right now these days. It's very touchy-goey. Almost reminds me of the Cold War in the 60s or so. It's like everybody's fingers on the button, kind of like who knows what's going to happen next. Depends on the free will and choices and decisions people make and the aliens make. So we'll see what happens.
And on the real individuals who make very poor decisions and that which are not benefiting life awareness are then projecting into what seem to be reptilian body forms, or body forms of that more distorted type. And if one were to continue to go along the very poor life decision route, they would find themselves even regressing to that of sort of animals again, and sort of and because the body form and your circumstances always reflect the decisions that you make, and it happens the other way around as well. Like then the reptilians, actually you can imagine those that are stepping up are finding themselves in a less distorted body types, which then reflect their decision to step up and work with the guides, and so it sort of works both ways. But the whole thing with the reptilians is they originally hail from the Orion system. They had a sort of hierarchy, a sort of a royal structure. They had a queen. We got chucked in the phantom zone by the guides, and And they originally had wars with various species that decimated their planet, destroyed their food supplies, made it so they had to go across the galaxy seeking other species in order to replenish their destroyed food supplies. And that's why they originally came to the planet Earth, and they found the planet, and it consisted of smart monkeys, as it were, and then they genetically altered them in order for them to be a slave species. They then inserted a lot of entities from the lower astral into the body forms that they recreated, and then the human species has been their slaves since it was recreated from the original smart monkeys that they found when they came to the planet Earth, and they mined all the gold and such, and then they have been managing the planet and the consciousness ever since. But it's come to a point now where they realise that what they're doing is what is happening now is due to the restriction throughout the overall consciousness, the simulator is going into a demise, because the simulator is the consciousness, and so according to how the consciousness is dictates the state of the simulation. That's why it goes through its phases from gold to iron, where we are now. And so with every idea being a restriction anyway, as you compound the restricting ideas in the consciousness, so you then compound and compact the simulator, which is the effect of the consciousness, which goes through its cycles, and it's at the point now where it's spiraling into oblivion, and it's preparing, and the great darkness is encroaching across creation, which can't be seen generally by humans anyway, because due to our agreement to control with the reptilians, they have the free will permission to alter the consciousness and also alter the human body vehicles as well, which by manipulating the consciousness, which then can dictate the extent of our perceptions. And so they're able to instill a cyberspace overlap, which has us not able to see the world as it actually is. Whereas a lot of the other aliens who haven't got this overlap in place, this cyberspace overlap in place over their perceptions, they can see the world, the planet Earth, and the whole of creation is shrouded in a great darkness, and the planet Earth is surrounded by this inky black sort of substance and such. But through real awareness, you can also see creation as it always is, which is a massive blackness at the moment, which is one of the expressions of a simulator heading towards its death spiral. And but at this time, of course, the reptilians can see this. They can see the simulator imploding. They can also see they're caught in the effects of that which they've always decided, because they've done all that they have, and they've embroiled the whole of the consciousness with their own consciousness and interwoven it all together in order to bring out a simulation that they want. They're very much caught in it as well, and so they will be caught in a simulator implosion with all that they have, those that they have subjugated. And the guides have approached the reptilians and explained this to them, and they've seen the darkness in the simulation for themselves. And so that's why a lot of them are stepping up now, because they've got really nowhere else to go. And with the Queen of Orion and the various reptilian royalty thrown into the Phantom Zone, they are more at liberty to be able to step up and assist the guides without the fear of death or reprisals, because they are very warlike and aggressive species. And previously, if any reptilian stepped out of line, they would be killed or executed. So they were very reluctant to do so, but now with the Queen, with their royalty sort of displaced, as it were, a lot more reptilians are stepping up. But obviously, there are still a lot of elements of their control system and the controlling reptilians that are still operating. They're still holding up the structure, because that's all they do, and they want to cling on to their personal self attitudes and their want for power and so on and so forth. And I've had a number of real side experiences recently where I've seen the guys rounding up more and more of these reptilian controllers and more or less giving them ultimatums: either work with us or you get chucked into the Phantom Zone, or you'll be contained and not allowed to operate. And again, it's not like they're imposing on the controllers free will. All they're doing is playing with the effects the controllers have decided for themselves. Because if a controller continues, or an individual continues to decide along abrasive lines, at one point they're going to have to face and be confronted with their abrasiveness, which reflects that which they've decided. So effectively, if they find themselves in the Phantom Zone or in a situation such as that, they really have decided it for themselves, and the guides are simply making use of the effects that these controllers have created. And so they can use them in these sort of creative ways to put them in the Phantom Zone, displace them, or put them out of the way. But also, as an alternative, they're giving them the option to step up, help everybody become more aware, sort of share the new and present years throughout the real side, and help with the galactic endeavours. Because, like Dwayne says, the more individuals that step up, that move out of their consciousness, so they are retracting agreement from a consciousness which is basically causing the demise of the simulator. And so for every individual who does step up and agrees to do so, they are retracting agreement from a consciousness which is one less agreement that is impacting the simulator adversely. And so every individual is another one that is offsetting the simulator situation. And as I said, the controllers, the reptilians, are quite a fearful bunch. Their attitudes are very warlike and very aggressively driven, but they're also very fear-based as well. And the slightest sort of situations back and forth can have them change their minds or agreements. And so, as I've recounted, sometimes it's looked as though they were ready to do certain things. A few times, other times they'd back off, they'd get a bit unnerved. And in the experience I just shared, the reptilians, because of the situation there, they sort of withdrew somewhat and are sort of waiting almost to decide what to do next. But
Okay, Kevin, number 2.
This real side experience would find me in very curious circumstances. It would all, of course, make sense to my real awareness with the overview and understanding it has of everything creational, but for my personal self, what was visually presented was completely nonsensical. I had to rather disregard what was being visually provided in the experience and lean more toward my real awareness recognition and the impressions of what was taking place. I seemed to be traversing through endless regions of geometrical shapes and forms, and these represented actual places that, if perceived through the senses of the physical body, or whatever senses of whatever body vehicle these places were designed for, would render the geometry into simulation. But it was neither a situation where I was receiving guide-created or selected-created experiences for representational purposes that my personal self could perceive as scenes, worlds, and situations, or was it anywhere in creation I was visiting where I had the required decoding apparatus to perceive and render it into a visual experience for the personal self's consideration? And even more curiously was how, as I moved through all the geometrical patterns, there were areas in it that I knew that would allow me to access other places beyond. But every time I came to these points, as my real awareness would know where they were, it was as though I was prevented from doing so, as though there were barriers in place that I couldn't breach, and even the impressions of communication from other beings telling me I couldn't access these points at this time. It was very strongly a sense of containment in a way, but as though something were being constructed beyond the containment that this overall place represented. And when what was being constructed beyond was complete, I would possibly be permitted to access it through these points, in this mass of geometrical weirdness. Maybe what lay beyond this place was some kind of additional simulator being constructed that would afford those of a real intended nature more time to recognize the ears from the continued comparison through experience that simulators provide, and that the one we currently are in, the simulator that is in demise, can potentially be abandoned. But for those not deciding to become more aware, they will remain in its deterioration as they so choose to continue to remain with their personal selves and the consciousness that is effecting the current simulator's collapse. They must remain in the effects of what they are deciding to continually create, and perhaps this might explain why I could not decode the simulator base template frequencies into simulation, that it appeared as just geometry. For our body vehicles are designed to be programmed through our decisions and agreements to generate virtual reality-like simulated experiences that reflect what we are deciding. Then we place our awareness in the personal self apparatus and experience this simulation that the decision idea programmed vehicles produce. And not only do we decide as to the simulation, and that the consciousness construction creates it, but that the body vehicles also have the decoding apparatus necessary to perceive it, just like how the data, that which we decide, that makes up a computer game, the created consciousness, is rendered as a visual experience through the computer, the decoding apparatus, and onto our monitor screens as our simulated experience. So possibly the reason I was unable to decode this simulated data into a visual experience, that I saw it as geometry, was a hint that as we perhaps are being prepared to enter a different simulator to continue our awareness process, our awareness then placed in altogether new body vehicles that are designed to decode this new simulator, and we perhaps begin to shut down the current body vehicles, which in turn will have them unable to any longer render the virtual reality of the simulation we are currently in, and perhaps we might see it briefly as a geometry or even binary code, its base state, before we decode it into visuals, and we may feel somewhat ungrounded or any number of physical effects. Then at a moment when this new simulator is ready, we move the awareness from the current personal self body vehicle and into an altogether different body vehicle, which is designed with the appropriate apparatus to decode this alternative simulator that is being prepared into a simulated virtual reality experience. I'm uncertain what would dictate who goes and who remains, but I would imagine that if you cling on to anything of the personal self, any of its ideas that are interwoven into the effects of the current overall simulator, that then would be tantamount to deciding to remain. For how can you switch simulators if you are deciding to remain the effects of your current simulator consciousness? By the ideas you are clinging onto that are interwoven with the very experiential fabric of it, with all the intermingling of attachment ideas that a single idea can involve also, that binds you with the experiences of others who also will be remaining the effects of their current simulator consciousness. Duane the great writer responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "Well, that's pretty self-explanatory, and with what's taking place, we're constantly getting different views here about creation and the possibility of doing something. And also, we have to leap from the boat. When we have to go, then it's time to go. So we will see what happens. Again, it's all about agreement. So you're providing alternative views."
Well, yeah, it just comes down to agreement and how crucial and important agreement is to everything we do and everything we agree to subconsciously and consciously. And this world is about that. And people that market agreement, which are the controllers, they are very good at it. They've been doing it for many years, many lifetimes, eons. And we're not really marketing. In a way we are. We're marketing awareness, in our own way, but it's not to the point where we want to control anybody or change anybody's mind or even change the world. It's just doing something that makes sense with the whole of life and everybody, so that everybody can benefit, everybody can be okay with, there's enough for everybody, even the reptilians. If you're listening, you don't have to grab and fight over the resources, because there's enough for everybody. It's just a matter of becoming more aware of what is, and that's a process. That's why we're here, to see if those who want to wake up can and will, decide to. I met a Serbian, or no, Croatian girl here. I'm gonna see if I can get Vesna connected with her down at the cafe just yesterday, and she's had experiences with reptilians. They think back home in Croatia that she's not so, but one time she was dancing or practice ballet dancing. She's a professional ballet dancer. She's 35 now, but she's one time when she was practicing, she looked over at her partner, this other girl, and the girl was changed into a reptilian. And then right away she changed back, but she kind of went like, she kind of folded in on herself. It was kind of and the reptilian knew that she had seen her, and I don't know what happened after that, but it was a very brief experience. But this ballerina, she's had many like that. Another time she saw this guy in a restaurant eating, and he was a reptilian. He changed into a reptilian. His eyes were real huge, like his eyes were eating the food somehow. And then he also kind of just folded into himself as he noticed that she saw him. And I mean, people are having these experiences all the time. It's just that they don't can't tell people, but that's why we're here. Listening to Kevin, gives you a place to come and share. We have Skypes all over the world all the time. Every day we have something going on where you can participate and come and share what you've experienced with reptilians or whatever, ETs, space people. It's okay, you're not crazy. We're not crazy, we're just making sense here. And you see how it ends up. And it's very interesting that it is day by day, moment by moment, what's going on here. And you can make a difference by how you decide. And it's very important, each one of us. Any last words, Jeremy, of encouragement for us?
Words of encouragement. I just wanted to say that, no, it's very important that people really look at their experiences, even physical level experiences. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't really have a lot of real side experiences, but I always kind of, I guess, like a people watcher. I was a very observant kid, and I noticed a lot of things. And as I started to grow up and become more aware and really kind of buckle down with the new you and these things, a lot of the things that I noticed in my childhood enhanced, and I started to actually see things on the physical level, whether that's certain agreements made or even just attachments and things like that. It's interesting to see the world beyond a personal sense, because I have the real side experiences and all that, but I have a lot of physical experiences as well, whether like just curious things. Like, I'll give an example. One time I was walking through, this was when I was still in school, I was walking through a gymnasium, and I saw this kind of little ball of light fly down in front of this boy, and he didn't notice it, and when it flew down in front of him, it went into the ground. Well, then he instantly looked down and then pulled out his cell phone and put his head down, and I started to notice that, and I thought that was curious that he responded to it even though he didn't see it. Like the action that he made matched exactly what I had seen, and no one else saw it. And I started to pay attention to little things like that. People react to all these little things that I don't think that they see, and I certainly don't say anything, because a lot of people are into their personal selves and their attitudes. Anything that's outside of their normal or what they can understand, well, it's just automatically strange. It's really a fear, and people don't have to be afraid, because there's so much to life, and it's just wonderful. All is into everything, and so you don't have to be afraid of anything, really. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. This lady I was talking about, she saw these balls of light too, these golden balls of light. She looked up in the sky. This is in the physical too. And she saw a portal opening up and these balls of light going through sideways through the portal. She got intuitively these were a convoy of aliens, and she said, take me. A lot of people are like, like that. They want to be, they have the adventuresome spirit. Whether all aliens, whether that's going to end up okay or not, we don't know. But if you do that, become more aware, and you'll have a better sense of your intuitiveness, and your real awareness will pick up on whether it's a benefit for you or not to have these relationships with the aliens. And Kevin, any last words from you?
In regards to balls of light, I mean, when I was very young, probably as far back as I can remember, until about the age of 7 or 8 or 9 possibly, I used to very frequently have these strange balls of light manifesting in my room. They would swirl around my room constantly, and there was and they would always be accompanied. And while they were going on, what would accompany that as well would be the sensation of a tremendous build up of energy within my physical body. And what happened later on was I was no longer able to see these balls of light anymore. but I would still feel that sensation of energy that always accompanied them. And that's always happened up until recent times. And I suspect that the reason why I wasn't able to see those balls of light may have something to do with the vaccinations, like I shared on a previous experience, a previous show, where it does seem there's certain things within the vaccinations which diminish our perceptual acuity through the personal vehicle, the physical vehicle. But I never determined what these balls of light were. But later on, I would actually make use of this tremendous build-up of energy and actually use that as also another means of astral projecting. So, but anyway, yeah. So it's a similar thing, yeah, to that.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say it's weird. It's like there's so many things all around us. Like I mentioned on a, where did I mention it? On a Skype or something, that one time when I looked up in the air, I saw the outline of a spaceship that I'd seen on the real side, and then I just kind of saw it zoom off, do a little, you know, jump, so to speak, and it just like I see these things, and it's funny because I try to tell some people, and they kind of look at me like, well, you know, that's really far out. You seem kind of, you know, off your rockers, kind of, is what people say. So I keep it not hush hush, but I just understand that not everybody is as receptive to things that are beyond what they can physically perceive. So it's fun in its own way, but yeah, it's just an experience. But thank you guys.
Yeah, we make it fun, and it is fun. You focus on survival and stuff, but you can make it fun too. And being with the real guides is fun. So we end this show with the new you. This is something you can sing before bed and see what life shows you. New you. Jeremy?
New you.
Kevin?